Hi, everyone. It's Heidi Lee. I'm here at Academy Mortgage. I'm here with Daniel Eisenhour, CEO of Captured Marketing. He is a fund manager and digital marketer extraordinaire. Daniel, why don't you tell me a little bit about what you're doing with marketing in a fund space?
Well, I started out with an internship at Alphabet, actually.
Okay.
And I started doing digital marketing for Google's branch in pay-per-click advertising and monitoring their search engine algorithms. And I really wanted to reach out after I was done and start my own company monitoring these same trends. And I really wanted to replicate that model for my own business because what they were doing was very effective. So after I left Alphabet, I decided to start my own company back in 2014, shortly after I graduated high school. And I mainly started doing search engine optimization, which is basically getting your company ranked on Google for small companies in the area. And there were some larger companies and medium-sized companies that I did some work for. But during my time at Alphabet, I worked on a project between Alibaba and Amazon, in which we were able to bring in about $34 million for suppliers, and they were able to scale tremendously, and they were very grateful, and they even gifted me some nice things for it. But
Nice.
it was really cool. It was a great experience. But as far as what I saw when it comes to the fundraising side of what they did, I didn't know at the time, but there was something to that I really liked. And later I found out that that was what funds do and how funds operate. And what I decided to do is start my own real estate fund. And what we're mainly looking to do is get the best return for our investors. And this being my first fund, I really want to incentivize the investors on the investor side to really get the best return possible.
So, what type of assets are you acquiring in your funds?
We're looking to acquire multifamily properties that have between 30 and 50 units. We're looking for more value add opportunities and looking to really give investors an upper hand on what we can do to raise rents and raise the property value and the income of the property. So what we would do is we would buy a property that has under 90% occupancy, which would be subpar in the industry, and really spruce up the property, put in some investment, and really make the property someplace where people want to live, and install dryers, washers, other forms of income-producing equipment in the property, and really raise the net operating income of the property.
Okay. So, how does your marketing background affect your fund management?
Well,
I know you kind of mentioned to me that you almost kind of grew up around this kind of thing and in the real estate world, and so how does that affect your fund management?
well, it's very interesting because two of my great uncles were big in real estate. One of them was really big in the Virginia area, northwestern Virginia, West Virginia, a little bit north of that into Pennsylvania as well. And then my other great uncle was really big in the Sun Belt area, specifically in Arizona and Texas. And it was interesting because at the time, this was back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where they were doing most of their business. And at that time, there was no internet, so it was a completely different game back then. But for me, the marketing side of things, now that the SEC is allowing certain types of funds to publicly advertise, especially in the crowdfunding space, it's revolutionizing how funds do business, and
Sure.
it's pushing some of the old tactics that people would use out of the market because they're just no longer relevant to the investors.
Right. Okay. Well, so what are some of your plans then for the future going forward?
For the biggest projects that I wanted to work on long term were vertical farming in urban areas, and really dive into food production for the developing world, and really look for opportunities also to develop affordable housing in the U.S. and abroad. Because what you see in countries like China and India is you see prefabricated housing, being built in factories and brought to site, and they construct skyscrapers in a matter of weeks instead of years or months.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic that this opportunity is really starting to spring up in other parts of the world, and I think it can really broaden the supply of the housing market, especially for multifamily housing.
Sure.
And it provides a lot of opportunity for investment. And I think that ultimately that's the future of how this is going to go, especially for urban development, because these projects are so much easier to manufacture off-site.
They're saving so much time and manpower.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really saves a lot of time for the planning and architecture involved. But I think the one thing they need to catch up on is we have much different building regulations in the United States than they do in Eastern Asia as of right now, because they're developing still and they have different building codes, different fire regulations, different things like that. And I think you can't directly import those kinds of structures into the United States yet.
Right.
But I think that will eventually become a reality, and that will be so key into developing large-scale multifamily properties in urban areas and even new urban areas that aren't currently developed right now.
Yeah.
And we could create new cities in a matter of short years. And it's just a fantastic opportunity. And I know a lot of venture capitalists who are getting into green energy and things like that. I want to personally branch into nuclear energy if possible, because I don't know if you've read this or not, but there's actually a bacteria that they found growing on the cores of nuclear power plants that actually eat and deteriorate nuclear waste. So it's becoming much more efficient and much safer to get rid of nuclear waste.
Oh.
And so nuclear power is becoming much or even safer than it was 10 years ago. And it has the opportunity to provide clean power across the board. I know here in Arizona, we've got, I think, a couple of nuclear power plants that power most of the city.
Yeah.
And I think that with the development and the cultures of these bacteria, that nuclear power could become something that powers the world and could really even power things like desalination for developing countries that don't have an adequate water supply.
Sure.
And it would be just fantastic to see that happen. Once we get this first fund done, I'd like to start what's called a 506c, which is a fund that is similar to what I want to start currently, which is a 506b. In a 506b, you're not allowed to publicly advertise your fund, but the advantage to having a 506b is that you don't have to, the investors only have to self-verify that they're accredited, because if you want to raise money from institutional investors and family offices and large people with lots of money, it's a lot easier to not have to go through the tax documents and all this for verifying income and liquid assets, especially for someone like family offices. They just don't want to do that.
Right.
And it's a lot easier to raise more money that way, but you have to do it in a more methodical and intentional way.
Yeah.
But as far as a 506c is concerned, you do have to verify the assets and the income that your potential investors have. On the other hand, though, you are allowed to publicly advertise, and you see people like Grant Cardone pushing this on his Instagram, and I have a lot of respect for Grant Cardone. I think he does a great job, but that's the route that he took with one of his funds, and it's a lot more labor intensive on the verification end. But I think ultimately that is where I will shine in the future, because with my marketing background and what I'm able to do to procure leads to investors is that I will be able to reach a larger audience and raise much more money than I would in my first fund.
Sure. Well, I understand you've already been pretty successful in getting some investors on board. What's a good way for investors and other fund managers or anybody that might want to get a hold of you or have questions for you? What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
The best way I would say to reach out to me is on LinkedIn. It's just Daniel Eisenhour, Eisenhour. I know it's a little bit of a different spelling than what people are typically used to.
Yeah.
But that would be where you'd want to connect with me and really reach out. And if you have questions, I'd be happy to connect with you. And if I don't know the answer to your question, I'll refer you to somebody who does, and I could flat out tell you that I'm not the right person to ask.
Yeah.
And so I might not have all the answers, but I'll point you in the right direction if I can.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. And if anybody wants to get a hold of me, I'm also pretty big into LinkedIn, so they can look for me, Heidi Lee. I'm licensed in Kansas now, which is new, and still in Arizona. I can also be found on social media at Lending by Heidi Lee. And or you can email me, heidi.lee@academymortgage.com.
I just want to say a big thank you to Academy Mortgage for hosting this event and this podcast. And I want to say Heidi is fantastic. She has a lot of experience in finance, and I look forward to really diving in with her and seeing what we can do to really make this investment fund fantastic.
I'm looking forward to it as well.